It's the all-time best recommendation for beginners out there.
It's a double.
Parts are everywhere, millions of them are out there, and every 2 days, there's another one coming to the market. It's the M4. Welcome to the Airsoft Pros and Cons, where I show you the cool stuff and not cool stuff about your favorite airsoft platforms. Last time we did the AK, and now we're running down a list for the underrated and hardly ever used M4. It's the platform I always recommend to beginners out there, and when you hear the pros and cons that I've got lined up for today, you'll know why. But first, I want to thank Civic for all the support they lend the USAirsoft channel, and I want to thank the support that we got on the last episode, or the first episode of this series. That last episode did very well, and if you would like to see another episode of the Airsoft Pros and Cons, then be sure to make this video break 500 likes in a day. Then, I'll write a list up for my favorite SMG platform, the MP5. Or I can broaden the Airsoft Pros and Cons series to tackle the pros and cons of airsoft fields versus CQB. Then I would also like to thank LCT Airsoft for also supporting this series. Recently, LCT has released a few of their classic offerings with all new internals, including gate Astra MOSFETs and rotary hop-ups, like with this RPK16 that I've been wanting for a really long time. And I also got sent this little monster. This is the MOE, the tiniest AK I've ever seen in the airsoft world. Both of these LCT offerings are of course available on Civic right now, so go take a look at them if you would like to. You'll be seeing a lot more of this RPK16 and the MOE on the USAirsoft channel though. Keep an eye out for that. But let's go ahead and get into this episode with pro number 1.
Ease of use.
Just like the AK platform, the M4 is pretty much dummy proof, and that should be easily proven with just how many fields use the M4 as their rental base. First time players around the world use the M4, and with how so many companies make their M4s fully ambidextrous, no one should have a problem with the controls. Even a few other platforms use the same control layout just because it's so handy. And before we talk about any aftermarket customization, even a basic M16 like this one is going to be super easy for anyone to understand. Which is why it's always recommended here on the USAirsoft channel, along with a few other reasons that we'll cover here.
Pro number 2. Technicians love it.
Along with the M4 and its variants being super easy to use for any player, it's also very easy to work on if you're a technician. Anyone claiming to be a tech isn't worth their salt if they don't know how to strip one of these down to its most basic components. Diagnosing any problem should be really quick, and with most manufacturers, including quick spring changed parts in the back of their gearboxes, you can go from field to close quarters very quickly. Even I, someone with very little teching expertise, can swap out any major components in a version 2 gearbox that's placed in any common M4 or M16 AEG. This M16 in particular is where I first started to dabble with teching and started learning how to swap out parts and what works with what, so if I can do it, anyone else out there can as well. This is great for the techs out there so they can get work done fast and painlessly. And it's great for the customer because then they won't have to wait as long as they could be if they were having some work done to maybe a G3 or an AK out there. Plus, the cost of labor can go down as well. But there's one thing about the M4 that can make some tech work a little bit annoying.
Con number 1. Full assembly before test fires.
The main reason why I hear about AK supremacy, as you don't have to fully assemble the gearbox just to test it if you have an AK. However, you have to almost fully assemble the lower of an M4 so you can test out the gearbox. The problem that I'm talking about has to do with there not being a motor cage on the version 2 gearbox as there would be on a version 3 gearbox. Whereas I can fully assemble a version 3 gearbox and test it in my hand, I can't do that with a version 2. As someone who normally takes apart gearboxes for my reviews, I can tell you that it's really annoying when you've put everything back together just to realize the selector plate is off center. or the stupid anti-reversal latch popped out. For the general player out there, you won't have to deal with this much unless you like doing all your own tech work, which I'd suggest you learn at your own pace. But for all the wasted time this fault in the M4's design has caused, it's going down as a con on my list.
Pro number 3. Technically superior.
To nobody's surprise out there, the M4 is the most replicated, the most sold, and the most supported platform in all of Airsoft. You can bet that basically everything has been tried to make this platform better. And that means pretty much every MOSFET, every electronic trigger unit, every HPA system, combo of battery connections, and more has been used, tested, and sold in an M4. This is great for you because you can always get something that you're looking for as long as you put in the time to look around. And you can easily ask other players to see what parts work in combination of other parts, or just ask about fitment. Where this pro really comes to benefit you as an M4 owner is when you have the most capable replica on the field in terms of fire control and trigger options. Binary fire, 3-round to 5-round burst options, low battery detection, active braking, pre-cocking, trigger reset options, semi-lockout, speed ramping, and more are all options I've seen in combination of one another. And if you don't like a certain gear set or hop-up part, you can replace and swap them out with ease. But I'll save that part for later on.
Con number 2. Very few side folders.
Now you can probably tell I'm scraping the very bottom of the barrel when I'm having to talk about side folding stocks as a con for the M4. But let's be fair. This is legitimately a reason why some people prefer the AK, like this LCT RPK-16, because they simply can fold the stock and make this into a smaller setup. Making this simple to explain, due to the M4's iconic buffer tube system that's normally used to house wires when it comes to AEGs, or to actually house a buffer system in a gas blowback, you don't have many options if you need a setup like this with this platform. There are options out there like some of G&G's combat machines, or with this Arcturus CAT, and a few others. I particularly like a good side folding stock, as we can see with my Galil, my favorite platform. But everything in the world has its limitations, and when it comes to the M4, this is one of them. It is not impossible to find M4s with a side folding stock and buffer tube, but don't expect to find them in the style that you like very easily. You're gonna need to do some hunting. However, moving on, we have the top 2 pros of the M4 that we have to talk about.
Pro number 4. The Honda Civic of Airsoft.
This right here is the most supported and most replicated platform in all of Airsoft. I've said that before. And everyone has pretty much made their own version in the Airsoft world. LCT, ICS, G&G, JG, Crytek, Tokumuri, WE Tech, GHK, everyone. You can get basic models with polymer bodies and no electronic thrills for less than $160. And you can get shell ejecting rare arms models for nearly $2,000. But here are a few of my suggestions. I know I have a bunch of M16s, but for gas blowbacks, look into WE Tech. The parts are everywhere and it's very easy to work on these, and you can generally build whatever you want with WE Tech for not too much money. For beginners, look into G&G combat machines, Specnarm's Core and Flex line, and some of the Arcturus offerings. For players looking at sinking $350 to $450, I suggest the VFC H&K line, like the 416 and M27. I like their SOTMOD M4, I like my ICS Mark 18, and Crytek just made a whole new line of M4s that have been selling very well lately. Besides that, the vast majority of the US player base really loves their M4s, to the point that you might notice at your local field or CQB arena that every single player is running an M4. It happens sometimes. And since they never stop selling, companies keep making them with slight improvements, with smaller features here and there. Attachments are absolutely everywhere, along with magazines of all shapes and sizes, so you can modify an M4 up and down endlessly. You can start with something like a basic M16A4, Then you can revert it back to something like a basic M16A1. Then you can swap out a bunch of receiver parts and rails and paint schemes, and boom, you've got something completely different. As long as you have the funds, you can do anything you want with an M4. But this Pro is also the M4's biggest con to some people.
Con number 3, M4 overuse.
Like I mentioned, the M4 is everywhere, especially in America. And with that comes over fatigue, which you'll see in a lot of comments of videos covering the SHOT Show event, or IWA and MOA. Events where all sorts of new airsoft products are shown off. People love seeing unique stuff on the field, or using platforms they've only seen in video games or in movies. And when people expect new and exciting stuff from any of these trade shows, but they see 90% M4s, people just lose interest. The talk of the community the past few months has been about S&T showing off their SVT-40, SKS, and AN-94 plans, along with their FG-42 teaser and more. That's unique stuff. That's cool regardless of power source or price. You won't wow many people at the field with nearly any M4 setup that you can put together. But if you don't care about what anyone else thinks about you, like you should, then you'll be fine. You can expect some M4 fatigue here and there, and I think for the most part we can all understand where those people are coming from. Turning this around one more time.
Pro number 5, ease of resale.
Now I'm going to gloss over this just a little bit because YouTube really does not like me talking about this kind of stuff. I have to fight for every single airsoft swap meet video that I make. And yet they still get demonetized later. So trust me when I say that I know what I'm talking about here. But the M4 is just so easy to get rid of when you're ready to move on to something else. People are always looking for a deal. And if a beginner is looking to save a few bucks at a swap meet to get into the game, you know they're going to look at some M4s that aren't too beaten up and are ready to have a battery plugged into them and taken onto the field. You can even make a few bucks at your local field if you're willing to rent out a few of your M4s of your own. I would do this a lot a few years ago with mystery box winnings that I got that I wasn't too interested in. And I'd make anywhere from $35 to $70 a month renting out those. That's gas money or grocery money. Getting rid of your M4 parts isn't as easy unless you have some good magazines at your table, but if you're trying to get rid of your slightly used or well-maintained M4s, you shouldn't have too many problems, as long as you're reasonable with what you're asking for. And that's it for this episode of Airsoft Pros and Cons. As you can clearly tell, the pros completely outweigh the cons when it comes to this platform. You have to go completely out of your way, or even out of your own convenience, to stay away from the M4. But if you really want to try something different, then maybe take a look at my previous episode, where we broke down what makes the AK platform so good in the airsoft world. And if you're a part of the 70% of people who watch but aren't subscribed, then help out a heavily suppressed creator out and hit the subscribe button now. But until that next video drops from the city of San Antonio, Texas, this has been Scott Hollenbeck, and I will be sure to see you all next time.